Hey guys, so welcome back. So you've been shortlisted for interview. What does that actually mean? And what are some of the questions that you guys might well be asked on that journey? So this is a really important bit of the process of preparing for some of those answers and trying to delve into your own history and what you've done to help to try to align yourself from there. So what is shortlisting to start with? So just for clarity, you'll have a lot of different applicants. Unfortunately, it's very rare that anyone else will just be happy for you to have this job. There's going to be other people who want this job if it's desirable. So you're going to have a large cohort that apply. That'll come with a resume and probably a cover letter that people will read. You'll then look at the criteria and cross-reference those from there. So again, it's really important to make it super clear that you have ticked all of the essential criteria. And then what happens is you're shortlisted for interview. And then there's going to be probably a handful on the day who get through to that final round from there. And then one, maybe two are hired, depending on whether it's full-time or part-time. So the audition is the first process, isn't it? This kind of process of you arrive in front of the panel, you're greeted, you're taken into a little room. There's often different components of the interview, so we'll talk a lot about those in the next few stages. Might be a presentation, might just be a Q&A, might be that you're delivering a session with an athlete, you're assessing something like in a practical exam. But basically it can look very different, that audition process, so be really clear about what's going to be required on the day to help you prepare. So when you get invited to interview, it's super exciting, isn't it? And you get that kind of realization that, wow, I've been invited in. This could actually happen for me, because on the day, it's a bit of a dogfight, isn't it? It can be anyone's depending on how you come across. So you've obviously ticked enough of the criteria to get through to this stage. So you are technically employable at that stage. That can come with a bit of imposter syndrome, though, as well, can't it? You're going, oh, am I ready? Can I step into the shoes? Is this beyond what I'm capable of? And then it's also important to kind of look at, well, actually, do I want this job? Is this somewhere that I see myself going? Is this a really good move now? What are my other options on the table? And you kind of come through this process to try and make the best decision based on what you know at the moment. Sometimes what you might need to do is kind of look at the terms that it would work for you, because you might think this is a great role, but actually I only want to do it on these terms. So might be part-time versus full-time, certain hours that you want to do. I wouldn't have that conversation necessarily straight away and go in with that. But again, if you get offered the role, opening up some of these conversations might be something that you do later on, but you've definitely got yourself in the mix. So at this stage, you might go, well, do I actually want this job? And then why do I want this job? And you might be super excited that this is the role that you've always dreamed of, and you're mad keen to go into it. Or it might be that you go, actually, I'm not sure that this is necessarily the job for me or my best option. You can have a few different bets on the table at the same time, a few different job applications on the table at the same time is really common. But do you actually want this job? So if you got offered it, would you actually take it? Or are you just using this as part of a process to try and get used to it? Now, this is something where we'll generally go, isn't it? So if you are offered a position, it's kind of this panic moment. Oh my God, I've got to get up to speed with all the latest research, approaches, return to sport criterias. What's the most optimal management for 1,000,001 different conditions? So it's sometimes tricky to know exactly where to start. But what I would do is kind of go into the key headlines of what is the job you're applying for? What are the typical things that you're necessarily going to see? And we'll talk a lot more about those questions and how to answer them later on. So don't panic. Don't go into fluster mode and try and learn all of the sports physiotherapy or MSK physiotherapy within kind of a week until interview. But you will need to kind of go away and really kind of hone down on what are the important things that you've done and how does that relate to some of the values. And some of that boils down to your why. So it's kind of that purpose. Why are you applying for this role in the first place? And why have you gone for that? So go back to basics. How are you going to demonstrate that the experiences and the investment that you've kind of done through your life can be applied to this role? So some of that applicability of how you're going to use the skills you've developed in this specific role. Really important to kind of think about. And then what you offer. So what are the reasons why you've gone for this? What are the skills that you've actually brought? Have you got examples of times that you've gone above and beyond, certain patients, certain athletes that you've worked with, whatever it is, what you will do when you get into role. And I think sometimes it's really sort of common to look at, oh my God, this job seems so far, so high away. But actually, you've come on a great journey so far to even get shortlisted. So sometimes spin yourself round, look at what you've done to get here, and then probe out all of the key examples of times and reflections that you've done certain things that align to your values and how that'll help you achieve the top of that mountain. Because you will have had times where someone's kind of been alongside you, showing you, and then ideally starting to kind of guide you yourself through that process under their watchful eye. So rather than being just purely a sponge and taking that information, you're starting to actually lead on certain parts. And ideally, you're at a stage where you're starting to apply that independently. And how's that journey looked? And think of examples that you've done that, because you will have done loads more than you think along that way. Or you might even have gone the other way, where you've nurtured through people to help develop them. So if you're stepping into a role in a first team, for example, and there's an academy, some of those academy physiotherapists are also going to come to you. So where have you shared your learnings and helped develop others is also a really nice thing to tick into. And I think this is just a brief thing, isn't it? Just to kind of touch upon, really, but really important. So make sure that you believe that you can do this. Be brave. That kind of mindset needs to be in the right place. And I quite like this. A ship in harbour is safe, but that's not what ships are built for. So if you've always had this kind of hankering to get your physio degree, move into sport or become a sports therapist, and then move into elite sports somewhere, then why not? It's going to require you to push yourself that little bit further every single time. And it doesn't always come easy, does it? So you will have had challenges. You will have had times where it's difficult to get experience alongside somebody. You might have applied, sent loads of begging letters out, trying to get a week's placement or something in the summer, and it's not come to fruition. But how have you overcome those barriers? Have you showed willing and persistence? Have you been proactive and tried to reach out to others? And actually, sometimes before you go in for the interview, reaching out to someone in the panel or whoever the contact is beforehand can make it so much less daunting. Ask questions via email, jump on a call with them if you can, because that familiarity, when you step in there and see a familiar face, can make it so much less daunting for you. Then you've got to think, well, what is it about me that makes me stand out? What makes me memorable compared to the many other people who are coming for interview or being shortlisted on that occasion? So be proactive, share some of those really interesting cases and experiences that you've gone through, and anything where you've gone above and beyond the norm, really. So that might be volunteering, it might be shadowing, it might be online learning things that you've done, it might be that you've reached out to people on socials, LinkedIn's, etc. And how have you put yourself out into that shop window? And then, does your behaviour demonstrate your passion around this specific role? Because it's fair enough being passionate about other things, but how does it specifically apply to this role that you're applying for and will benefit that employer? And I think this kind of boils down to a bit of focus, really. So where should you drive your attention and focus into? Well, it has to be the things that matter, and it has to be the things that you can control. The uncontrollables are things that you have no control over, are they? You can't influence them at all. So bring it back to yourself. What can you influence directly? And that is what you should be focusing on at this stage. So when it comes to competition, don't worry about who else is in that, who's applied for that role. Someone might have extensive experience in that specific sport, but what do you bring that you can potentially kind of counteract that with? What extra things do you bring? Are you the personality side that you can bring out, and that enthusiasm and motivation and getting that across can be just as powerful as someone who's stepped into an arena or a stadium with kind of 40, 50,000 people on a weekly basis. So don't forget that it's not just about what you've done, it's about your mentality, your approach that comes with that. And again, it goes down to kind of don't compare your beginning to someone else's middle, because you can always compare. There's always someone who's done more, who's done that extra little bit. It's that classic thing before an exam, isn't it, where someone bowls in and throws a curveball in it. Oh, did you cover this and did you cover that? And you go, oh, I didn't think I had to. But there's always going to be people who have done more things or different things than you. But what can you control? And go back to that every single time. Now, in terms of the thing which I think makes a massive difference is that sort of rehearsal time that you have. So almost before, obviously, actors go onto stage, they will have done countless amounts of rehearsing. Professional athletes will have rehearsed the same thing over and over again in practice, in training. So then when it comes to the big event, they deliver. I think sometimes people, certainly myself, may have great ideas in your head, but if you haven't vocalized that and you haven't delivered it even on your own, into a mirror, wherever it may be, you probably won't nail it quite as well. So how have you prepared for this role in particular in this interview? So does the alignment sit within this role, and can you give specific examples? We talked a bit about controlling the controllables. So again, think of really positive examples, maybe times that haven't gone so well, where your attitude and delivery's been brilliant. Have you had challenges? What preparations have you done? And how is your mindset? Again, there might be people who are internally applying who may have a much greater insight into what that role is, but what do you bring from previous roles? Address the elephant in the room is also a classic one, really. So if someone has worked within football in particular, they're very, very keen on making sure that people have worked in football before. But actually, what do you bring from the other sports that you've worked in? Have you been an athlete? Have you worked with different types of athletes at different levels and overcome similar things? Certainly rugby, a classic example, we manage concussions so much better than the football world do in general. So we can bring that quality into there. We have a wide range of different injuries in rugby, in judo. Again, I've got experiences of managing all of those. And then it's probably just worth having a little reread through your personal statement, make sure that it's actually accurate, and you can back up and expand on things that are in there. Because if you've given something as a little example and they're like, oh, that sounds intriguing, tell me more, you need to be able to kind of make sure you haven't just been bullshitting your way through that. Okay, so just on to the standard interview questions that you might well get in your interview. So what would the panel ask you? Because there's always going to be standard things that come up or variations of. Why do you want this role? And why would you be the best suited candidate for this position? So those sorts of things, have a little delve into your own little journey. Might be that you're telling them about your journey so far and how that's helped prepare you for this specific role. They'll often ask you about strengths. So what are your key strengths? And give an example of a time that you've demonstrated how you've utilized these strengths. Tell us about a time you've had a negative experience at work. This might be a challenge, something that you've overcome, and you're really kind of giving a nice little example of what's happened and how you overcame those barriers. What characteristics make a good team, and how would you improve this? We got asked in our interview in the judo world, what would the best medicine and sports science team in the world look like as part of that question? So again, think about NDTs, think about communication, team working, collaborative working, making sure communication and everything is absolutely perfect, or as best that it possibly can be. You'll likely be asked to talk about a case study or an example of a patient or an athlete that you've worked with and how you've kind of overcome barriers or taken them back into sport. So think of a condition that you're more confident with and then describe that. This is a really good one, I think, that kind of give an example of a mistake that you've made in practice. So think of a time that maybe you came up again, something didn't quite go to plan, and how you navigated your way through that journey. And the other thing is, once you've jotted a lot of these ideas down, I'd really, really encourage you to speak that out loud. I would do it in the car if I was driving along, commuting somewhere, in the house, in the room, wherever it is, before this presentation, for example, just talking through what you're going to say. And that can make the delivery so much more polished from there. There's obviously lots of things with body language, non-verbal cues, etc. But just as a bare minimum, have a look at some of those key titles and get used to just talking through how you went through that journey, and make sure that when you're saying it, it's coming out in a really positive kind of light. So don't beat yourself up. Don't focus in the negatives, the things that you necessarily did wrong, but maybe take them on that journey with you so there's positives that come out of that as well. And lastly, what's likely to happen is they're going to ask if you've got any questions for the panel. So it'd be really abnormal, wouldn't it, if you applied for a job and you hadn't thought about whether that was definitely for you. So that thoughtful insight is really encouraged by a panel, and they'll often love the fact that they can talk because they've been listening to multiple people all day. So what would you want to ask them? And again, this might be pretty unique, but things that I tend to ask is, I know that 2 days aren't necessarily the same in a sporting world, but what would a typical day look like if I successfully stepped into this post? What are the key features or reasons why you're bringing someone into the team? And some of that can kind of come in and around, are there specific areas that you'd want me to focus on? Is there an expertise that you want me to bring? Is there any projects that you sort of earmarked for me to do? And again, that can be really useful, can't it? Because you can give examples, and it also gives you a little bit of drive and focus on what you're going to do before you start that role. You want to develop in this role as well, don't you? So what training opportunities are there? What's that going to look like? How much? Is there a budget? Things like that. And what are the opportunities to develop within this role? So I think it's also really nice to know that this isn't just a stepping stone. So where could you lead yourself to in 5, 10 years? It might be you go 3 years, whatever it may be. How are you going to grow and develop within that role so you're connected to that organization? You might even ask, what do you enjoy most about the role and working in this place? Because actually it gives you a nice chance to get an insight into where they're at and where their headspace is. And is there anything that you might like to change about it? And last but not least, sort of when do you have a rough timeline for making your decision known and letting us be aware of when that decision has been made? So they're just things that you can think about again on that process before you step into the spotlight, which is where we're going to go for our next talk, a little bit about what to do on that interview day and go from there. Again, if you've got any questions, queries, anything that you want to ask, you can drop me an email, steve@growphysioacademy.com. And if you're keen to learn more about this and watch the whole process, just dive onto the growphysioacademy.com website. And I'll see you guys in the next stage.